Welcome to Watches with Dennis, and today I want to talk about 5 common pet peeves that I actually think are just fine when it comes to wristwatches. And again, it's all subjective. I'm not expecting to change anyone's mind. I fully expect if these are your pet peeves, you're going to keep having them as pet peeves. I have a whole bunch of pet peeves. I'm not going to mention them here because I'm doing something a little bit different this time. I'm going to focus on things that I think are just A-okay. But I would really be interested to know what common pet peeves you all have, or that you know people have, that you actually think are A-okay. So if you wouldn't mind commenting those below, if you find the video interesting, I'd really like to go and read and just see all the different takes that people have on some of these commonly brought up items. The first pet peeve I'm going to point out that I actually don't have a problem with is closed casebacks. Now, closed casebacks are really interesting. I've commented on them from time to time. I don't know at this point if I have more watches with closed casebacks or display, probably display at the stage, because there's been a lot of demand for them. But I think a lot of people get really annoyed when they see closed casebacks. I've seen them comment as such on a number of watches. And to me, it's more of a bell curve than anything in terms of how I view casework should be done. So I think on very affordable models of watches that a lot of people getting into watch collecting are going to consider buying, it makes sense to have a display caseback because they're interested in mechanical watches. They want to embrace that. The manufacturer wants them to celebrate that, so let them see the movement. And then at the high end, we've got anglage, we've got Côte de Genève, you've got movement decoration, blued screws and all the rest of it. And so given the level of work, which often involves hand polishing, hand finishing elements to these movements, it makes sense to display those. If a watch is sufficiently expensive that you wouldn't expect it to be someone's first watch, and the movement manufacturer isn't willing to put in any effort to truly decorate the movement, then I don't really see the point in having it in a display format. Generally speaking, display casebacks do add a little bit of thickness that you can avoid with a closed caseback. So again, if there's nothing to show off and you're not targeting a segment of the market that would be interested in just looking at a basic movement, I don't really see the point in avoiding the closed caseback. So I don't see it as a big deal, but I know it does bother many when they see that they cannot see the movement inside of the watch. My second pet peeve that I think is just fine are dial side power reserve indicators. This one comes up quite a bit, and I guess maybe it's one of two things. There's either people just don't like seeing a power reserve indicator. They don't like it as a complication in and of itself, and again, more power to them if that's just a complication that doesn't interest them. But the other scenario may be more leaning into balanced dial design. And as a general rule, I do like to see balanced dial designs. And we know that a brand like A. Lange & Söhne with the Lange 1 does balance the power reserve indicator. It's part of the golden ratio layout to the dial. But we've seen this come up with a number of other brands. And the one that always jumps out to my mind is Grand Seiko. And Grand Seiko has responded to this criticism by going so far as to start putting power reserve indicators on the back of the watch. The problem I have with putting a complication on the back of the watch is it's not very convenient to use. And so it goes against the tool aesthetic. I don't inherently hate it. I wouldn't reject a watch because the power reserve indicator is on the movement side of the watch. However, the purpose of a power reserve indicator as a complication is to be useful. And the back of the watch in general is not very useful. And so, again, we see lots of things that aren't particularly well balanced. You could argue that the 3 o'clock date window is not inherently balanced. It's often a different size than the rest of whatever's going on at the 9 o'clock position. It isn't the same as an indice, even if it was properly proportioned. There's a lot of things. And I do subscribe to the pet peeve about dial layout and getting annoyed with balance issues. However, a power reserve indicator is visually interesting. I think you can throw one on without having some sort of thing on the opposite side of the watch. And so again, it's one of those pet peeves that I think in reality is no big deal. Third pet peeve, and this is one I definitely don't subscribe to, but I've seen a lot of people, which is not liking any watch with less than 100 meters of water resistance. I don't know, maybe a lot of you swim all the time with your watches, or you're firefighters or something, or you live in monsoon season 24/7. I don't know. But I've seen people who are downright afraid of watches under 100 meters water resistance, that if they were to wear one and wash their hands, they have a risk of completely blowing apart the movement and destroying the watch in a matter of seconds. I don't know where it's come from. It's, I guess, sort of the question of it. I think maybe it relates to the fact that water resistance is a very confusing indicator because it's not, in most instances for most brands, indicative of the actual depth you can take the watch, because it has to do with how the arm moves and the actual pressure involved and all the rest of it. There are some watches that truly you can be afraid of using in the sink, but we're talking things like minute repeaters, things with zero water resistance, things that had to make compromises in that regard because of particular features. And the only one I really know of are things like minute repeaters, where sometimes they will make certain sacrifices so that the watch can actually chime and the sound can get out easily. Other than that, though, it's not particularly common to find watches under 30 meters of water resistance. And 30 meters is hand wash proof. 30 meters is you can go out in the rain. We start getting into things like, can I shower with my watch, more in the 50 meter range? But that's really, again, down to the brand and what they use to set their water resistance levels. The bottom line is virtually no one actually needs a 100 meter water resistance watch. And so I don't understand it myself. From a pet peeve perspective, it's definitely something I have never looked at, but I do have a fondness for things like dress watches and thin watches. And obviously water resistance starts to get in the way of both of those things because of what is required to get up to those water resistance levels. That actually leads nicely into my fourth pet peeve, which is not a big deal for me. And that is people that have a problem with non-screw down crowns. I understand this one a bit more than I must have at least 100 meters of water resistance. But all right, the screw down crown thing, in particular, I'm really thinking of 100 meter water resistance watches. That's typically where you see it, where there are some brands, Hamilton, for example, I know has done crowns that are not screw down, but when the crown is in position 0, fully into the case, it's 100 meters water resistance. And for some reason, a number of watch enthusiasts have decided that they don't believe that, or they don't trust it, or they don't trust themselves without the screw down crown. And so they reject watches that lack that. And I guess it's a comfort thing, mentally comfortable to go and know, like, if I've got it, it's screwed down, I feel like it's super water resistant. And maybe this is because some people have had bad experiences where they have had screw down crown watches, didn't screw the crown in, and then water got into the watch. But if the watch is designed not to screw down and just rely on the gasket and the crown going into contact with the case, why do you not believe the manufacturer? I don't understand why that has to be a pet peeve. Again, it just makes the watch easier to access in a lot of ways. And obviously things like a hand wind watch, that isn't an automatic, but a hand wind only, I find it much more convenient not to have screw down crowns because those watches constantly need manipulated. So this is one of those where I think I know where people are coming from on it. But to me, when I'm buying a watch, I don't even look to see if it has a screw down crown for 100 meters water resistance or less. And honestly, I assume it does have one if we're getting 200 meters or higher in the water resistance range. And the last pet peeve that I don't think is a real pet peeve, at least for me, is the use of third-party movements. And again, this tends to happen more on the luxury side of the equation, where you have people that look and they go, whoa, 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 this watch is, $5,000. It better have an in-house movement. And I would say, why? I think the real answer is because then you know that there was R&D cost to develop the in-house movement, but you don't know the equation, but you tell yourself any price is possible if it's an in-house movement. If it's a third-party movement, you draw a line in the sand. I know plenty of people that will say, if it's got a Sellita SW200 in it, I ain't paying over $1,500, for example. Or if it's an Bosch movement, so it's third party, but maybe the movement manufacturer has made some adjustments to it, like they've refined it, maybe done some different parts. I'm thinking more than just putting their name on a rotor or whatnot. But again, it's still baseline a third party movement. And maybe the person goes, okay, well, I'll go up to $4,000 then, but a line in the sand. I think it's totally fine to draw lines in the sand for a whole host of reasons. But I think it's a little weird when it comes to the whole in-house versus third party, because sometimes we've seen plenty of manufacturers that have come out with an in-house movement that isn't really any better than the third-party movement, or whatever you're getting out of it, like another 10 hours of power reserve, doesn't seem to justify the 2x cost that the watch has now been applied. You can really tell where this might have an impact when you look at brands that have third-party movements and in-house movements, and you can start debating, is it really worth that value? You could have that debate with Oris, for example. Tudor is a great example. This is a brand that started with third-party movements across the board, and they have over the years moved more and more in-house. They do still have a few model lines that use third-party movements. They're all the less popular model lines, and it would not shock me within the next decade if all of those are either eliminated as lines or they go ahead and put in an in-house movement. But their in-house movement, when they first came out with it, had some issues, and a lot of brands have run into that sort of thing. So to me, I think the consumer knows in-house means more work was put into it, or at least that's the assumption, and they assume that means it's better. And then brands have figured out they can basically charge whatever they want once they say it's an in-house movement. That's no longer a barrier to price. Don't get me wrong, there are some awesome in-house movements, and it's definitely something I look at in terms of what movement powers what watch at what price. But I don't see the point in setting price criteria, for example, and going, whoa, if this watch has an ETA as its base, there's absolutely no reason it can cost $5,000. Again, what if they put a lot of hand finishing into the movement? You really have to weigh some other aspects, in my opinion, other than just saying, it had Salida on the base plate, it had ETA on the base plate. We can't consider a higher price tag. So for me, it's a pet peeve that doesn't really need to be one. But anyway, those are 5 common watch collector pet peeves that I don't think are actual pet peeves. But again, as I noted at the start of the video, I'd be really interested to know what things you guys know are pet peeves, but aren't pet peeves for you. So if you wouldn't mind commenting those, I'd enjoy reading it. Other than that, if you enjoyed the video, please do give it a like. It helps the channel. And you can subscribe if you want to be automatically notified when I have new videos out. Hope you all have a really good day.